going to be making the egg tarts shell for y'all, and this is one of those recipes that I actually took from like a Hong Kong cooking show and then played around with it myself. But I always get annoyed because whenever I see egg tart recipes online or in shows, they always say, well, you know, line the bottom with puff pastry, and I hate that because having gone to kind of Asian bakeries most of my life, I know the consistency of puff pastry is a little bit more crunchy and not as moistureful. The process to making this egg tart dough is very similar to puff pastry, but at the same time it's really different, and you're going to get kind of like a puff pastry that's more tender, that has slightly more moisture to it. I don't think that this is a recipe that you see often because people usually just tend to kind of make the custard part of it, so I think it's going to be a really interesting little segment. So I will see you guys in the kitchen.
Okay guys, so in egg tarts you make something called an oil layer dough and then a water layer dough, and the oil layer dough is sort of like the butter layer in the croissants, and so I'm going to start making that oil layer first, and I'm just combining a little bit of shortening with a little bit of butter flavoring. Traditionally I know you use lard, but I did not have any, so I'm just beating that together until it is fluffy, and then adding in a little bit of salt and a little bit of flour, and then just mixing that until everything is smooth. And it's interesting because you're like, well, how is this going to become a dough that you can roll out? With a lot of flour is the answer. So I'm going to put it into a piece of saran wrap and then stick it into the refrigerator or freezer for a couple of hours until it's hard enough to work with. Then you're going to use the same bowl, and then we're going to go on and make that water layer dough. And it starts off similarly, but just with less fat in it. So a little bit of water, a little bit of oil, a little bit of sugar, and then cake flour. And you just blend that all together. Don't worry about what comes first. We're doing the same thing right now as the oil layer dough, and just putting it in the saran wrap and then putting it in the freezer or a refrigerator until it is hard enough to work with. And a good kind of way to find that out is to see if your thumb kind of sticks in to the dough, but I would definitely err more towards the side of overly hard because this stuff melts super quickly. Now I'm starting off actually with the oil layer dough, and you can tell it was miserable. I was doing this middle of summer, my kitchen did not have air conditioning, but you know, that's its own thing. And then I'm actually putting in that water layer up on top, and I'm flouring it really well to a sickening amount of flour that I am embarrassed to admit that I used. But I actually think that you had to kind of use that much, at least for the initial layer, because the more that I worked with it after this initial layer, the easier that it got to work with. So yeah, just a ton more cake flour was actually what I used instead of normal AP flour. So eventually I got it to this, and I'm just sticking a lot more flour on it because I was so worried. You definitely have to, if you're working in warmer temperatures, to bring it back and forth between this and probably your freezer, and just sticking it in for 10 minutes or so beforehand. So this is when we started doing our layers, and for the layers what you do is you essentially fold the dough layer into fours. So fold it once on the side, once again, and then once in the middle. And you do this for about 3 times, and you flip it just like puff pastry, and you do it again. And you saw what I did the first time was I used the bench scraper, and I tried to kind of turn it into a neater rectangle, and I find that that really helps. So folding 2 on the side, and then 1 down the middle again, and then I'm flipping it, and if it does start to warm up and soften, put it back into the refrigerator for a little bit of time. So right now I am actually caring about how much flour I use, so I'm using the brush to scrape off any excess, and yeah, it does get a lot easier the more layers you go into it, just because there's more flour worked in, and it's not as sticky because the fats aren't exposed. So next next thing is you want to find a fluted circular cookie cutter along with your egg tart shells. And I find it a little bit easier if the diameter of your cookie cutter is a little bit bigger than your egg tart shells. So our final roll, and I rolled it to about a quarter of an inch, a little bit thinner, and I'm just making sure that the dough is making contact with the actual shell itself. And I'm pressing that edge where the bottom meets the sides, and making sure that the dough rises a little bit above the shell, because it will shrink while cooking. So it's a little bit something like this. And oh man, you can see all of those layers of the shells that you worked so hard to make. Well, there you go, guys. I hope that wasn't too hard. Thank you so much for watching, and please like or subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and also if you want to see me filling up these egg tart shells the next time, which should not be nearly as hard as this. So thank you so much for watching.